Hi, and welcome to Policy Beast. I'm Jemai Yusuf, and I'm here with Cece, who is a technology safety educator who's worked with policymakers in Ashland and beyond to help protect people from the dangers of microwave radiation. So, hi Cece, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jemai.
So to start us off, can you tell us how you became involved with Wi-Fi and telecommunication safety?
Sure. About 3 years ago, I was at book group, and a friend who's an electrical engineer said there could be something potentially harmful with Wi-Fi. And I just kind of made a mental note of it, but then it crossed my path again from another written source. And I thought, if there's anything to this, then I should probably investigate. I had helped to run the Ashland Education Foundation for about 8 years, and I personally helped to lead 7 campaigns to bring technology into our schools. And once I finished with that, I went to work directly for the schools as our grant coordinator, and I helped a lot of teachers to get iPads and Chromebooks and Apple TVs and smart boards, and so I felt morally obliged to investigate.
So why is this such an important public policy issue?
It's important because the information that this world scientists are producing is not getting out to the public. And what I discovered when I started looking into this is that all of our cell phones, all of our Wi-Fi devices operate off of, as you said, two-way microwave radiation that's unshielded. And if you were to look at the electromagnetic spectrum, we know about ionizing radiation over here that can break the atom. But over here in the microwave spectrum, we have not only microwave ovens, but radar, decked cordless phones, baby monitors, utility smart meters, and all of our tablets, cell phones, iPads, all of the technology, even down to the wearables that people are now starting to put on their bodies. All of it operates off of two-way unshielded microwave radiation.
So why is that important that it's unshielded microwave radiation? What does that mean?
Because if you access your technology through like an Ethernet cable or fiber optics, there is no airborne microwave radiation. Those signals are channeling through a cable. When you have data going through the air, it's completely unshielded, and our bodies absorb that.
And so what happens within our bodies when we absorb this microwave radiation?
That's a great question. So back in 2007, a group of world scientists got together because they had worked with this type of technology. It might have been in military because that's where it grew out of. This was radar. And now they're thinking it's being deployed commercially. So what does that mean for the general public? So they knew that this was developed as a war weapon. But they said we need to do more research to understand it better. So between 2007 and 2012, there were more studies done, and not just a couple, but 1,800 all over the world. And so when the scientists reconvened with some public health experts, they wrote up the Bioinitiative report. And a couple of years ago, there was a summary for the public that was put up. And just to run through the table of contents briefly, there's key scientific evidence for damage to sperm and reproduction, that children are more vulnerable, there are fetal and neonatal effects on autism, electrohypersensitivity is a new term that we have, where people who maybe never felt right under fluorescent lights, or children, or the elderly, or somebody with a known heart condition, these are vulnerable populations, and they might start feeling unwell in this now ubiquitous sea of microwave radiation that we're exposed to. And so it might present as like a stabbing headache, it could be tinnitus or the ringing in the ears, it could be vertigo or balance issues, it could be nausea because it affects the mast cells in our body. So now we have this term called EHS, which is electrohypersensitivity. It's also being shown to compromise the blood-brain barrier, so toxins are going to places in our brain and in our body that they've never been before. It's genotoxic, it's neurotoxic, and I think we all heard bits and pieces in the media about brain cancers being suspected to be related to cell phones. So this is heavy, serious evidence of harm. Now, science takes a long time to play out, and the technology keeps changing. So when I first started learning about this, I raised it to Ashland Public Schools, and nobody there had heard about it before. And I asked our IT folks, and they hadn't heard about it. But the more I dug, the more I was seeing that this is very real. But one of the conflicting things that you'll find if you were to go out and just do a search on microwave radiation from cell phones or wireless technology, you will find thousands of credible, peer-reviewed scientific studies like this. But you will also find another body of science that says there's no harm. So it's very confusing for people to look at that. But when you dig a little deeper and see who has done the research, Dr. Henry Lai did that analysis, and he found that 70% of the studies that were done by non-industry funded scientists showed great evidence of biological harm. And about 68 or 70% of the ones that were funded by industry say there's no harm.
So what do you mean by industry?
By industry, it's the telecommunications industry. It also involves the energy industry because they're now rolling out these smart utility meters. It also involves technology industry. So when the FCC set the guidelines for how much radiation you can expose the public to, they didn't test it on children. They didn't test it on fetuses or women who are typically smaller than men or the elderly. All they did was use this mannequin of a 220-pound, 6-foot military model in the 90th percentile of fitness. That's the only testing that was done. And it was just a mannequin with gel inside. It wasn't this complex organ that we have as our brain. And so they just kept rolling out the products. And so other countries at this time, when the Bioinitiative report was first done in 2007, some countries backed off. Some countries already knew that this was a military weapon. So if you were to look at, for instance, the amount of radiation allowed at the cell phone spectrum, this is 800 to 900 megahertz. Salzburg, Austria allows 0.1 microwatts per centimeter squared. So how much radiation on a centimeter of your skin is allowed? 0.1, and that's in line in the range with what the Bioinitiative report recommends. Switzerland's a 4, China's a 6, Russia and Italy are a 10. We're 580. So we are literally thousands of times higher in our public exposure limits than what other countries are doing.
But what does that mean in terms of actually using the devices? If we have more of this radiation, does that mean our devices work better? Or what would be the reasoning for even allowing any radiation with these devices?
Commerce. And, you know, we get to do a lot of really great things with technology. And the message is not no technology, it's safe technology. And so when our school committee was looking at all of this research and trying to make heads or tails of it, you know, this isn't what their background is in. So it was a very difficult conversation to have. But when they went in and read the fine print, at least our government does this with every mobile device in the very fine print. It says keep this X amount of distance from your body or you may exceed the FCC guidelines, which we know are not protective to begin with. So if you put a device on your body, and where do we keep our iPads? Where do we keep our phones? You know, a lot of girls or women put them in their bras like a pocket. Gentlemen are putting them in their chest pockets. People stick them in their pants pockets. So if you have this on the body and it's in active mode, you've already exceeded the FCC limits, which don't really protect us to begin with.
I see.
So for folks who have, say, an iPhone, if you want to see what it says in there, go into Settings, then go into General, go into About, go into Legal, and right there it says RF exposure, radio frequency exposure. And it says, keep this at least 5/8 of an inch away from the body and only use it on holders and stuff that create some distance. So
I see.
People don't even know that this is out there.
But how can you sufficiently use your device if you're not putting it up to your ear, for example, to talk on a cell phone? Is there ways to do that?
There are. Distance is your friend, so if you can, hardwire your devices. So use the landline at home. You can forward your cell phone to it, and then you can put your cell phone either off or in airplane mode. When you have to be out on the go, only put it in active mode when you're actually using it. And if you can, use speakerphone to create that distance from your body.
What do you mean by active mode? Do you mean like locking your cell phone?
Well, if all of our devices come with the default being on. And so when it's on, it's constantly pulsing microwave radiation to make a handshake with the nearest cell tower or the nearest router for Wi-Fi. But if we're not using it, put it in airplane mode, and that cuts the signal right off.
Okay, interesting. So for people at home, what are other things they can do to make sure, or to even learn more about this radiation?
Right. So I was really proud of Ashland Public Schools because we tried to find somebody higher up who could advise them on this, and when we first spoke to the town of Ashland, our health agent wasn't aware of it. He was aware enough of when cell towers started coming to town that the municipalities had their hands tied and couldn't say whether they wanted to have this or where they could have it placed. And he explained to me that the municipal offices have to follow the protocol set by the state, and the state has to follow the regulations set by the feds. And the feds come back to this Telecommunications Act from 1996 that says if there's any damage from this, you're kind of out of luck. You can't come back and claim damages. And I was thinking, well, that's just crazy, but the industry was very influential in that legislation to protect their corporate profits over public health.
Okay.
So that's where we are. So I was really proud of our schools for at least doing their due diligence and reading the fine print and saying, well, why wouldn't we do at least what the manufacturers are telling us? And that's to create distance. And they had learned enough by then to know that you don't want this on all the time. So Ashland Public Schools has a sign laminated and hanging in all of our classrooms that says, turn off the device when it's not in use, because that'll turn off the radiation. Turn Wi-Fi on only when needed. So we shouldn't have those routers going all the time, because whether the devices are off or on, that's still pulsing to make a handshake all the time. And that's what our children are sitting in, and our staff all day during school hours. Always place a mobile device on a solid surface so you don't want it against the body.
I see.
And when I was a little kid, my mom always said, stand back from the TV. So even if it's not in active Wi-Fi mode, if it's on, it still has an electromagnetic field, and you want to create distance for that. So I was really proud of Ashland for doing this. And right around that time, there was a panel of world experts that came to Boston to teach our legislature that it's important to have a right to know about this, because it does not make it to the public. One of our school committee members, Marcia Rennie, had served on school committee for like 9 years, and she knew enough to do due diligence. So she went and looked at Washington, D.C. to see who the top lobbyists are. And in that list, she found telecom and energy and IT, and realized that there could be a genuine conflict of interest there.
I see.
And last summer of 2015, your alma mater, Harvard, in their law school Center for Ethics, published a report called Captured Agency, and it talks about how the FCC is protecting industry interests over public interest. It's a really great report. This is just the cover, but it's 59 pages, and it was written by a journalist, so it's a really well put together discussion of how we've gotten into this situation. And then when you take that list of the top lobbyists and you cross-reference it with the top advertisers in our country, you get a marriage. So the people who are pushing these devices on the public, and they're great, they're fun, we've all adopted them, are the same ones who control the advertising dollars. And mainstream media is not going to do true journalism on this because they can't afford to bite the hand that feeds them. So they're getting their advertising dollars from the industry, and there has not been true investigative journalism, which is why it's nice to be able to have a cable program where you are free to actually explore the truth.
And so in terms of actual policies, you mentioned a little bit with the signage at the schools. So what else has been going on in Ashland about this?
What I did next was I realized that the public in general is not familiar with this issue, but because there's mounting evidence of biological harm, I met with Senator Karen Spilka, and I went to her office hours at Sunnyside. And by then I had purchased a meter to be able to measure this, because you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it, so how do we even know this exists? So I bought a meter and I met with Senator Spilka, and I measured her cell phone and I measured her district director Pooja Mehta's laptop, and both of them measured off the charts with microwave radiation. So Senator Spilka was gracious to put me with a lawyer in her office, and together we crafted a very simple bill, double spaced front and back, but it's Senate Bill 1222, and it's an act creating a special commission to study the health impacts of electromagnetic fields. So first you have to educate people, so let's get the right, bright minds together and sit down and look at the research that exists. And then if there's consensus, decide on strategies to inform the public so we have a right to choose. Right now we don't. We're just using it completely unbeknownst to us that there is biological risk here.
And so you mentioned this measuring device, and I see that you've brought something with you.
I have. This is called an Acoustic Meter, and when I turn it on, over here, this measures the digital spiked erratic pulse. And that is what is biologically harmful to us. So with this technology, we have regular radio waves. So those are rolling continuous sine waves. And unless you happen to be under the broadcast tower, our bodies can acclimate to that pretty easily. But when you use digital technology like this for all of our cell phones and Wi-Fi devices, on top of that rolling sine wave is this spiked erratic pulse. And that peak is what is destructive to our cells. So I'll turn this on here, and if there were no electromagnetic radiation in the room, all we'd hear is a slight crackle, but here we see it light into the yellow. If there was nothing, we wouldn't see any light. If it's green, that means there's a little bit, but below the threshold where today we know biological harm is incurred. When it goes into yellow, that's where people who experience symptoms of electrohypersensitivity begin to feel those symptoms. And anything that goes into red is where we have this massive body of evidence. So I'll just do a quick demonstration. So right now, my cell phone is in airplane mode, and if I wake it up and take it out of airplane mode, it's going to start looking for a handshake with the nearest cell tower. And so this is literally off the charts and thousands of times higher than where we know biological harm is happening. And so when you think about our children being in a classroom where we have, say, 30 tablets going at once, plus the access points in the ceiling that go through walls, these are industrial strength devices, it's something we really need to pay attention to and work together to come up with solutions so that our children are protected. And fetuses too, if you think about somebody who's pregnant and has the baby here, that's all soft tissue. And there's nothing protecting that fetus as it's developing and building all of its brain neurons. I watched a parent group out in Petaluma, California recently. They've been getting together at a coffee shop to educate parents at night. And there was a woman who stood up in like 20 seconds and said, we lost our, I think it was a 4 or 5-year-old child to brain cancer. And she said, and I carried my cell phone right there the whole time I was pregnant. And I just was like, you know, it's criminal, because with a little bit of education, we would know, don't put the iPad on the bump there, you know? Use hardwiring. And at home and at school, the solution is actually pretty simple. We already have hardwiring running from the street to the buildings, to our homes, in through to our wireless routers. They can be turned into a hardwired router. And then you just turn off the Wi-Fi settings. I actually just recently figured out how to hardwire my daughter's iPhone. So you plug in the charger, right? You put it into a camera adapter. You also add to the camera adapter a little lightning adapter, and this will allow you to put an Ethernet cable in.
Oh,
and then you
I
just plug
see.
it into your device. So if my daughter's doing 3 hours of homework a night and she's collaborating with her classmates, she can just plug this right in, go into the settings, turn off the Wi-Fi, turn off the Bluetooth, turn off the data, turn off the locator antenna, because we don't even realize these devices have 4 or 5 different antennas that individually pulse for a signal to their respective cell tower or router.
So it is possible to still do what we need
Yeah.
to do with our devices, but to just use it in a way that is somewhat safer at least.
Exactly, exactly. And I'd also recommend that those decked cordless phones, the digital cordless phones, those are like having your own private cell tower in the house.
Really?
They emit constantly. In other countries, they have an eco system where it only emits when it's in active mode during a phone call. But in our country, our telecommunications industry has not brought that technology in.
I see.
And so your router, you want to do the best you can to eliminate all of this at home if you can. For starters, you might turn your router off at night because when we sleep, our bodies need to regenerate. We need to cell repair. And what the science is showing us is there's at least 4 different ways that this radiation is impacting us on the cellular level. The first is we are bioelectric beings, and we have these voltage-gated channels throughout our system that regulate signals throughout all of our body's abilities. And this electromagnetic radiation is interfering with those signals.
I see.
And it's causing a leakage at the voltage-gated calcium channels, and it's causing this chemical reaction outside of the cell that's producing peroxynitrite, which is a really nasty free radical. And then that free radical goes in and does what free radicals do to our organs. So that peroxynitrite is the first thing that they're finding is happening with this technology. The second thing affects our sleep. So in the wee hours of darkness, as part of the circadian rhythm, our pineal gland in the brain releases melatonin, and melatonin's job in part is to go in and clean up things like free radicals and other debris that's in our system, or just from regular cell repair, there's debris that's left behind. So what's happening is our pineal gland cannot distinguish between natural light and this light energy form that is microwave radiation.
Yeah, I've heard that you should put off all your devices before you go to sleep for reasons.
And this is why. So the pineal gland can't release the melatonin properly, and if you've known anybody who's had breast cancer, quite often their melatonin's down like 90%. So if we've got these toxic buildups going in our system, and our mechanism for cleaning up is damaged, then we can't do the cleanup. A third thing that happens is it impacts our blood, and it causes our blood to glom, and as that circulates through our system, it affects the way our body operates, so that is not good. And then fourth, in a controlled medical setting, we are now using electromagnetic radiation to do things like stimulate bone cell growth or stimulate stem cell growth, which is amazing in a controlled medical situation. But the way we're using this, where we're just blanketed in this microwave radiation all the time, it's causing cells that we wouldn't necessarily want to grow faster, and cause complications with our health. So everybody would be very well advised to hardwire whatever you can. If you have to use wireless technology, use it selectively. You know, don't be sitting there just surfing the net on it. Use your hardwired computer for that. Put an Ethernet cable into your laptop or into your tablet, or even your phone. You know, it's kind of neat that we know we can do that too.
So in our last few minutes here, is there a way that people can easily maybe contact you for questions or look up other resources?
Sure. As I've been researching this, I have put up a research repository online, and it's at Google Sites Understanding EMFs or electromagnetic fields. And my contact information is listed there. And I will also say that thank you to the Ashland Board of Selectmen for granting the funds to put a device like this in the Ashland Public Library so residents can take it out, bring it home, look to see what their exposures are, perhaps choose to remediate, and then measure again and see if they got everything. My printer, my wireless mouse, my wireless keyboard, I didn't even stop to think that those are also emitting. So by having a device that you can actually measure, you can get a pretty good reading, and then make your choices. But protect your sleep above all else if you can. I just wanted to mention a couple other things that have happened since Ashland put their best practices into place. There's a group of over 220 world scientists who work with this technology who said the time is long past since we need to protect the public. So they put together a 2-page international appeal to the World Health Organization and to the United Nations to say, first of all, we need to put protective measures in place. We need to remove the standards we have today and bring them way down so they're actually protecting at the biological level. Children and pregnant women should be protected. The guidelines need to be strengthened. The manufacturers need to be encouraged to develop safe technology. And on this journey, I've had the privilege of meeting Frank Clegg, who was the former longtime president of Microsoft Canada. And when he retired, he did his own investigation, sought out the top scientists, and came back and said, our standards in the United States and Canada are not safe. And so he started Canadians for Safe Technology, and he's up there working with Parliament. And he came and spoke to our legislature here to say we really need to pay attention. And then just this spring, a couple of other really important things came out. The IEEE is the Professional Association of Electronics and Electrical Engineers, and they helped to set the FCC standards based just on how much heat would it take to raise the temperature of the skin. They too are acknowledging that there are biological effects at the non-thermal level. In their May Power Watch magazine, they put out an article, some effects of weak magnetic fields on biological systems. Radio frequency fields can change radical concentrations and cancer cell growth rates. So even the folks who set this are now acknowledging it's not just heat-based. And then probably most importantly, the United States National Toxicology Program this spring has been doing a multi-year study, $25 million study, to see if cell phones are carcinogenic. And they expected to come in and prove that it's not, but the very first set of findings they released found DNA damage, brain, and heart tumors. So this kind of puts the nail in the coffin to say we do need to pay attention because we do have the scientific evidence, peer-reviewed, and we need to start learning how to protect ourselves.
Well, thank you so much, Cece, for coming in. And as she said, you can find out more information about her on Google sites, Understanding EMF, and you can always go to the library and check out that device as well. And so thank you again for coming on Policy Beast. It was great talking with you.
Thanks so much.
We'd love to hear from you here at Policy Beast, and there are a lot of ways to get in touch with us. You can follow us on Twitter at PolicyBeastTV. We have a Facebook fan page. Look us up on Facebook. You can also email us at policybeasttv@gmail.com. So many ways to get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear about any kind of show ideas or any kind of topics that you'd like us to dive deep into.